Welcome onto this edition of the Faster Beyond 50 podcast. My name is Brad Naddles. We've got the coach Lindsay Parry with us once again. And today we're talking about stress and its role as an over 50s runner, particularly around cortisol and how it impacts your sleep, but the knock-on effect to your running, particularly your training and your racing performance. It is a huge topic to unpack today, and we're going to go deep when it comes to cortisol and how you can optimize your performance as a runner. Lindsay, great to catch up once again. We spoke last week a little bit about sort of my heavy training schedule and the two ultras I've run, but the ultra that I'm targeting, Comrades Marathon, coming up in just a couple of weeks' time. I tell you, I am so nervous, it's ridiculous, but you're training for one of the majors. How's your training going?
Yeah, good, Brad. I'm still in the kind of foundational phase, and it's going nicely, and I'm enjoying it. I think that's the most important part. I've put myself back on some heart rate training. Still running hard once a week, but yeah, just building up steadily. Got to build up. 29th of June around there, I think, is when I'm really going to start the focused marathon training. But thanks for asking. It's going nicely.
Good. Consistency is key, as you keep telling all of us. But yeah, Lindsay, let's dive into what we want to chat about today, and stress and cortisol and sleep and how it impacts your running performance. Why is sleep and stress so crucial for runners over 50? What is the impact if you don't manage it properly?
So let's start with the stress, because the stress, our bodies don't differentiate between stress. I think that's the important thing to accept now. So if you like pushing late nights, for example, and that's then bumps up your cortisol levels because you need them to kind of survive the next day because you haven't got enough sleep. Or if you hit mega work stress and you've got a lot of things, huge project to get through, and constantly under pressure all day long, cortisol is a great drug for that, because it helps us, keeps us on the go. It reduces our need for sleep. It suppresses our appetite, so we don't need to stop and grab food or whatever. And whether that stress is, as I said, work related, you doing things at night, you like late at night, family bereavement, or some other kind of family stress, or massive issues with one of your children, something like that, whatever it is, that your body can't differentiate between that and training stress. Okay, so human beings respond quite well to fairly consistent, moderate doses of stress. Um, but when we start adding these blocks of stress onto each other, then you start running into problem. And as we get older, Brad, and I think that's really where you're trying to go with this, is as we get older, we also start to struggle a little bit with sleep. Our sleeping patterns, can't sleep quite as long, aren't as comfortable when we sleep, maybe don't sleep as deeply, but that adds another stress. And it takes away, this is very important, it takes away one of our vehicles for reducing stress. And so that just pushes up cortisol, and then cortisol impacts your ability to sleep, and it starts this little cycle, and then we don't recover properly, because also during sleep is our major time for recovery from everything, from training, from life. That's when we recover, is when we sleep.
Yeah, Lindsay, I think let's just dig a little bit deeper onto cortisol. First of all, what is it, and how does it impact your performance and recovery as a runner?
Yeah, so it's a stress hormone, and it effectively stimulates your body to produce adrenaline, and that is what helps keep us on the go. It helps us, like I said, get through tricky periods, and that's, from an evolutionary point of view, was super useful, because if we were being hunted or on a hunt to try and get the food that we needed, or to prevent ourselves from becoming food, it was really good, because we could keep on going for a couple of days at a time if we needed to, on minimal sleep and minimal food, because we just could keep going. But then there would need to be this like period of absolute rest, so that we can recoup, recover, leach that cortisol out of the system, so that we can sleep properly again and start to recover. So that's really cortisol in a nutshell. And the reason why sleep's so important is because when we sleep, that is when our body actually increases the secretion of testosterone and growth hormone, which are two incredibly important hormones in terms of repairing all sorts of bodily functions, repairing muscles that are broken down from when we are exercising, etc. So that's really our restorative period, and that will increases up to roughly 2 a.m. in the morning, and then our levels of testosterone and growth hormone start to decrease as we get through to the morning, and we wake up and we go about our daily life. So things like very bright lights for very late into the evening, for example, are things that will continue to keep that cortisol stress high, dealing with really loud noises. So this is part of the issue with cortisol stress is actually just our modern day lives. Lots of bright lights, lots of loud noises. That is stressful for us to process and keeps our cortisol high. So if we don't have a mechanism to kind of leach that cortisol out of the system, that's going to impact onto sleep. So stress is a big one. Overtraining is another stress. So training itself, excellent way to leach cortisol out of the system. Again, that's where your kind of low aerobic, moderate duration exercise is fantastic. As soon as we move into very high intensity exercise, it's good for you, make no mistake, but that contributes a little bit to cortisol or cortisol stress. But again, if you're spacing those workouts far enough away from each other, you don't have loads of other massive stressful things in your life, that adds a good stress into your life. And then in between those hard bouts, we'll do much easier, slower, moderate duration efforts. And then your long runs also push up your cortisol levels. And that's why we only really want to do those when we're training specifically for something. But yeah, that kind of just gives you a little bit of an idea how these things all lock in and plug into each other.
Yeah, we'll dig a little bit deeper in this podcast into how to get that balance right. But before we do that, Lindsay, how does chronic stress and or poor sleep, for that matter, affect training outcomes, and then also increase your risk of injury? Obviously, as we get older, that risk of injury does increase, but I'm sure like increased stress and poor sleep plays into that big time as well.
Absolutely, Brad, and that's also a little bit chicken and egg. I mean, is the lack? I mean, the lack of sleep feeds into the stress. The stress feeds into the lack of sleep. But where does it begin and end? Is always a little bit difficult in terms of getting to the ultimate solution. But really, when we're cruising around in a high cortisol state, we primed to move, which is the one. I guess that's the one good thing. You really are primed to move, but we then don't sleep properly, so we don't recover properly from the exercise that we did. But when we wake up in a very fatigued state, we need more cortisol to keep going. And so over a long term, that's not how we were designed. We weren't designed to do this for long periods of time. We do that for long periods of time, can get what we call adrenal fatigue. In other words, your body becomes desensitized to the cortisol. So the cortisol still impacts your ability to sleep, but now it stops doing what it needs to do in terms of stimulating the adrenals, because you get adrenal fatigue and you become desensitized to it. And that's when you start walking around feeling tired all day. I'm tired all day. Now I need caffeine. And then caffeine feeds in, and caffeine stimulates those adrenal glands. But as soon as the caffeine is pulled out of your system, you crash and burn and feel terrible. So you start looking for other ways to push yourself up. That again impacts into your sleep, particularly if you're using stimulants late in the day. That again impacts into your ability to sleep. So this kind of now recovery cycle starts to be compromised. And then to your point, Brad, we're not recovering properly, so we become more susceptible to getting injured. And importantly, when we start to get tired, we also start to experience neural fatigue. So our coordination starts to go. We're more likely to fall, we're more likely to pull muscles, we're more likely to hurt ourselves in various ways because our nervous system is now also not doing what it's supposed to be doing, just in terms of controlling our movement through space.
Yeah, absolutely. Lindsay, you mentioned your body can't differentiate between stress, whether it's training stress or work stress or family stress. But there is, and you mentioned that training is a great way to leach cortisol. So there is a difference between good stress and bad stress. But obviously, you've got to get that balance right as a human being. How do you get that balance right between the two?
Yeah. So again, Brad, easy intensity, moderate duration exercise very seldom contributes to stress. So if you are running at your easy runs at the right intensity and you're keeping them at moderate duration, so let's call that 30 to 75 minutes, moderate duration, around about that sort of ballpark. If you keeping it there, it's not going to be adding to stress. Where training starts to contribute to stress is if we are running too many hard runs, too close together, doing our easy runs too hard. Those are things that ratchet up the stress on your body. And then when we start to combine those with other stresses, that's where it starts to become unmanageable. Now, when I used to work at the then high performance center in Pretoria in the physiology lab, we had the gold medal rowing team from the London Olympics, the South African rowing team from the London Olympics. The boat split up, and some of the other members then subsequently got medals at the Rio Olympics, made finals in the Tokyo Olympics. But one thing that I learned out of that program was that and a lot of them were still students and studying, but when they went into exams, the then head of the rowing program would count the exam as a hard training session. And that's kind of the example that I want to use, is that hard sessions and repeated hard sessions are the same as very stressful life situations. And we then need to account for them. So what that means really is that when we go into periods of high stress in our lives, we should probably look to modify our training and minimize the really hard sessions that we do so that we don't push that stress beyond. Similarly, when we go into periods where we're training really hard for something, in particular things like marathons, which require very long training runs and some quite intense sessions, we should just try and manage our other external risks to the best of our ability. Because if we don't, that's when we get this high cortisol that stays, doesn't get leached out of the system with our easy training sessions. And then it starts to compromise our ability to sleep, and long term starts to compromise our ability to recover and starts to compromise our coordination. And then that leads to illness and injury.
I love that, Lindsay, because that leads like really nicely into my next question, which is around sleep. And what are some of the signs that your sleep isn't supporting your recovery or your training isn't supporting your sleep? You can probably look at that two different ways, but I think it all boils down to the same thing. What are some of the red flags we should be looking out for?
So the first red flag for me always is that when I am tired, I'm struggling to fall asleep. Okay, so that's kind of a red flag for me always. And Brad, we know that as we get older, that little step can become a little bit harder and a little bit more complicated. But that's always for me my first little red flag. And if it's coupled with a decreasing appetite, so now I'm struggling to fall asleep, I'm very tired, I'm struggling to fall asleep, and I'm very tired, I'm not hungry. Those two things tell me that the reason I'm not sleeping is because my stress is not managed, and that's impacting my ability to sleep. Okay. If, on the other hand, you're tired, you're falling asleep fairly well, but you are waking up feeling terribly tired, and you can't get through a day without a cup of coffee. So if you're drinking coffee to get through your day rather than drinking coffee because you enjoy coffee, that's the kind of red flag. For people who don't use caffeine, that'll be like you'll wake up, you struggle to wake up, and a lot of people do struggle to wake up, but then 15 to 20 minutes later, once they're actually awake, feel good and can pretty much keep going until maybe some early afternoon fatigue. That kind of thing's okay. But when you really struggle to wake up, takes you a long time to get woken up, and then sort of mid-morning you just tired again. That would be a really good give you a really good idea of am I sleeping well, and is my sleep restful enough that I'm recovering.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are other signs like irritability, but like one thing I've learned about irritability is when I'm irritable, I don't notice. I need someone else to tell me, why are you being like this, Lindsay?
Which is too funny. Lindsay, let's talk a little bit about the number. And I hate asking this question, but people always ask us, so I'm going to ask it. How much sleep do runners over 50 really need for optimal performance and health?
So look, it's an incredibly hard question to answer. And in the little research I've read around specifically older people in their sleep, and I haven't read a lot of it, I'll be honest, but what I have read of it, it's more is not like a consensus of how many hours people should get. There's like a consensus of how much sleep people do get. So I feel like that's not the answer to the question. If you run around and ask 1,000 people how much they sleep and then is it enough? I mean, what are you measuring that by? So I would go as far as to say that your minimum, absolute minimum, should be 6 hours, but that you should be looking to get as close to 8 hours as you can get per night. So that's the range, 6 to 8 hours. But I would keep a little log. um, I've got friends who 6 hours is plenty, and for me, 6 hours is not plenty. I can get by on 6 hours, but then that means that I have to get 1 or 2 nights in the week where I can get to 8 or 9, even. Although uh, another problem as you get older is that my bladder very seldom allows me to sleep 9 hours now without waking up to go to the bathroom. Um, so those are the kind of things that you're balancing. For me, if I can do 7 hours, like very consistently in the sevens, I can function pretty damn well. And then maybe an afternoon sleep on a weekend or something like that. That really seems to work well for me. Um, and then, Brad, I know you're going to jump into this next, but for me, the hours are almost less important personally than the quality of the sleep. And we were chatting offline even before we decided to do this topic.
Mm.
We were chatting offline about just how well we had slept. Um, I think it was a week ago, whatever it was. Um,
Yeah, but before you get
but
into the
yes,
before you get into the quality, because that is where I do want to go. But there's one other question I wanted to ask you too, and I think it boils down to not the ideal number, but just trying to get slightly more, especially if you're training hard, slightly more than you normally do. And as you were looking, or as you were giving that answer, I was actually just looking at my Garmin, and I've said this before on the podcast. This is something that I've worked so hard on over the last year because my sleep over the years has been terrible. Like, and it's not that I struggle to sleep or I'm training hard. I just was super erratic. Like I wasn't consistent with my sleep. Like I'd have one good night's sleep and then the next night I would only get 4 hours, just for whatever reason. So it was this up and down. And I remember on my Garmin, I tracked my sleep score on my Garmin, and now that's become a bit of a game. Is I try and see if I can improve that sleep score all the time. And I just had to look at it now, and literally for the last month, it's a flat line, Lindsay. It's not. I could probably improve it, but for me, like training, consistency is so important. Is just getting that consistency of decent sleep over a long period of time, and it makes such a big difference. Because, and I'm going to ask you this from an inconsistent perspective: how can sleep, like in sleeping poorly or sleeping well inconsistently, if that makes sense, that can have such a major impact, even on a well-structured training plan, like not resting and recovering properly. Talk to us a little bit about some of the ways you can sabotage. If you're training well, you're doing everything else well, but if you're not getting your sleep right, how it sabotages your performance. If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsay and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
Well, as I said earlier in the pod, like honestly, the sleep when we recover while we sleep, that's like where the vast majority of our recovery takes place. It's certainly when our accelerated recovery takes place. So if you are robbing yourself of that good quality sleep consistently, you're not going to recover properly. Your I think in that scenario, your sort of your best case is that you're just tired all the time, which is not fun for you or anyone else. Then your second best scenario, of course, is that you just get a little bit sick and that illness forces you to rest, and then you kind of bounce back quite quickly. And the worst case scenario is that you either get very sick or injured, because those two things are really going to rob you of training time and start to impact on your ability to achieve your goal. Um, but also, I mean, not everyone who's on this podcast, Brad, is listening to this because they want to run a fast 5 or a fast 21 or a fast marathon. It also just starts to impact your ability to live life. So if you are in that kind of growing band of people that want to just live healthy and well so that they can see their grandchildren graduate, play football in the back garden with your kids, that sort of thing, then this is the kind of thing that starts to impact that, because your health starts to suffer over the long term. And so you do want to be consistent with your sleep. And to your point, if you are consistent about your routine at night, there's a good chance that you'll get into bed at a similar time every night and wake up at a similar time every day. So that gives you a much better way of controlling whether it's 6 or it's 7 or it's 8 hours, is just really maintaining that consistency so that when we have a wedding or an anniversary or a birthday or a 21st celebration or a graduation or whatever it is, we can very easily manage one night of reduced, compromised sleep. Our body is robust, it's in a good place, and we can use the cortisol for what it's meant for, which is to get us through some short-term stress and then get back to our routine.
Yeah, let's talk some practicalities. One is the sort of pre-bedtime routine, but then also from you mentioned the sleep quality perspective.
Yeah, so look, there's a couple of things in the sleep quality. So routine is great. I mean, if you have your routine where, and that's what do we do with our children? I mean, that's just the highlight for those of you who do still have children or can think back to when you had children. My routine with our kids is pretty fixed. We have dinner at the same time every evening. We'll spend a bit of time with the kids. Then the kids will get ready for bed, shower, brushing teeth, taking whatever they need to take and do. I will read to my children. They're quite old, but they still like me to read to them, which is cool. I'll do that as long as I can. But again, it helps plug in that routine for them and settles them. Um, and then I will have a little chat to them, say goodnight to them, and they will read to themselves for a little bit and then go to sleep. So they've got a great little routine going, and we'll have to break that routine up with homework and stuff as our kids move into high school and that kind of thing. The point is we'll always try and keep this routine so that we know we can. Adults should be the same. After that, in our house, after that routine, my wife and I will have a little bit of a routine too, and that hopefully ends up with us in bed between 9:30 and 10. Sometimes not. Um, and last night, classic example, I only climbed into bed at 10, and then I'm a bit grumpy because I like to read a little bit before I go to sleep. And then I know I'm going to get less than 7 hours of sleep. So, these are kind of the things that do happen, but that we try to minimize by keeping a fairly good routine. So that's the routine side. That helps you control how much sleep you're getting. And it also helps into the quality, because that routine helps to calm and soothe and split you up from your day to try and dampen that cortisol. And in that kind of period, that between 9 and 9:30, or 9:30 to 10, depending on exactly what's happening in the house that evening, that half an hour should really be unplugged from the matrix. So get off screens and that kind of thing. Bright screens, thought-provoking, um, things that you are watching with light. Those things can also stimulate cortisol, and that'll then impact your ability to sleep. So yeah, off screens, chatting to your significant other. There's a great way to just settle everything. And then in terms of the quality, Brad, cool, dark environment is the best environment for sleeping in. I think, to your point when we were chatting about how well we slept, it is much cooler. We're going now in the southern hemisphere, we're going into winter, so it's much cooler, much more comfortable to sleep in cool, dark environment. Cell phones in another room, bright clocks, cover them with a cloth, keep that room super dark, nice and cool, and that'll just improve the quality of your sleep immensely.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you something now. You're not allowed to tell my kids this, because one of the things that we've done is we've almost shifted. I don't want to say we've shifted our clocks forward, but we've slowly moved their bedtimes earlier. And I've got kids slightly older than yours, Linz, but we've pushed their bedtime earlier, so we can almost get that evening routine starting earlier for us. Where you said you get into bed 9:30, you want to be like we're in bed by like 8:30. Like that is our plan. Like I remember as a kid, we used to beg our parents to stay up late because we thought like they stay up all night. No, our kids beg us to stay up late, but we like send them to bed so we can go to bed. It's not that we want to be up without them, but that's one of the things that we've done, and it's actually made quite a big difference. It's actually made a big difference to them too, because they're also getting slightly more sleep, so they're not as grumpy in the mornings to get them up for school and that sort of stuff. So it has made a huge difference in our house. Lindsay, talk to me about the role of timing. And this is across various things. So timing when it comes to sort of like workouts, meals. You mentioned your bladder's not performing like it used to, and I'm in the same boat. But timing, sort of drinks at night, screen time you've mentioned, but like how does that impact sleep and stress regulation? Like, should we be exercising in the morning if that is a stress, so that we can ease into the evenings, or is afternoon exercise good? What about dinner? Should we be eating dinner earlier? I don't know. What's the deal?
So, Brad, if I exercise too late in the evening, I struggle to fall asleep at night. So there's definitely I get properly stimulated in a good way by exercise, but it leads to me being quite wired and then struggling to fall asleep at night. But not all people are wired like that. And it's certainly more so if I do like a really good session and I felt like, like it was great. So in the evenings, if I do need to run in the evenings now, I keep it super, 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 super easy. Otherwise, I just know it's going to impact my ability to fall asleep and to sleep well. But honestly, that is humans are different. So that's a kind of do it how it works for you. Certainly, timing of meals. You don't want to be going to bed hungry. As soon as you're hungry, cortisol gets stimulated. Cortisol gets stimulated, you can struggle to sleep. So you don't want to go to sleep hungry. And many dietitians, when they're looking at calorie restriction, will therefore put a little late evening snack into the diet so that you don't go to sleep hungry, because that'll impact your sleep. That'll impact cortisol. If the cortisol goes up, it impacts your ability to lose weight. So that's why so many nutritionists and dietitians give you that little snack just before bedtime. Okay. So when you eat does make a difference. What you eat can make a big difference. So again, we are different as human beings, and a diary is very useful with these kind of things. Like for some people, a heavy like steak meal, for example, will just really make them sleepy and good for sleep. And for others, very hard for the body to process a really big chunk of meat like that and actually makes them feel uncomfortable and just can't sleep comfortably. So work on the types of foods that leave you in a better position to sleep. Like for me, I try not to drink any fluids anymore after dinner. So I try and drink well. I wake up in the morning now and have water, which I've always been pretty bad at in most of my life. But now I know that I'm going to probably be a little bit compromised, because I don't like to wake up at night anymore. So I don't drink after dinner. But yeah, as soon as I wake up, I will then drink. I'll try and stay hydrated really well throughout the day. Yeah, and then come that sort of 6:30, that's it. No more fluids for me. And then obviously make sure that I empty my bladder. Literally, that's the last thing I do before I climb in bed. And sometimes I'll read and then go and empty my bladder and come back and get into bed so I can sleep longer. And then, Brad, I know you want to ask me something, but the one thing I want to add there is that take it a step further with your food diary and actually pair foods with your what your watch tells you about the quality of your sleep. So the watch isn't always super accurate. Sometimes tells me I had a bad night's sleep, but I had the most wonderful night's sleep ever. But over the whole, it's fairly good at tracking these things. And so pair. So what I have discovered is that even 2 beers, even if I feel like it relaxes me and I sleep well, that's like total no-no for my HRV. So that doesn't mean I'm never going to drink alcohol, but it just always makes me think twice about having the second beer, or if I'm in hard training, do I really need to have that beer? So just in these condensed periods where I know I need to recover well, I will use that information to make sure that I have the best sleep I can in periods where I need it.
Yeah, I was going to save that question to last, but I think it's worthwhile sort of bringing that up now, and then I'll shunt my other question. But it's around tracking and ways that we can track. And it's funny you say that pairing the food with sleep. I've got a really good friend, and I haven't done it, but I'm so keen to do it because I love these sorts of things. He's been using Whoop, where he's tracking sort of everything. And one thing, he's showing me the dashboard. And one thing that I really liked about it was that you can almost run these little A/B tests on yourself with regards to like what you're eating. You mentioned the alcohol and that sort of thing, and almost optimize like how do I sleep if I have a steak versus like grilled chicken, as an example, or if I have 2 glasses of wine versus 1 glass of wine, like that sort of stuff. And he's really sort of digging into how it impacts his sleep quality, like the duration of his sleep, and it's making a huge difference. So that is one sort of tool. Do you can like other tools that you can suggest that people use to track this sort of thing?
Yeah, so most of the watches now, smartwatches, will do that. Like I said, they're a little bit limited. But again, if you're tracking these things long term, you can see where the data that you can peel out, but you can pick up trends. So that's great. Yeah, Whoop, Aura Ring are the two leading rings that you can use to do those things. And if you don't have access to that kind of technology, you can use the good old resting heart rate when you wake up in the morning, tracking your heart rate. It's not quite as sensitive, but it still gives you a good idea. And of course, just a little 1 out of 10. How do I feel that I slept last night? And then about an hour after you've been awake, how am I feeling today? And those three things combined can do a really good job of just telling you how you perform based on how much sleep you're getting, what you're eating, what you're drinking, those kind of things.
And then Lindsay, things like outside of what we've spoken today, so like things to reduce stress and sort of calm the nervous system. What are your thoughts on things like mindfulness, meditation, breath work, and how that can potentially impact our sleep and performance as an over 50s runner?
Yeah, so look, one of my weaknesses as a person, full stop, is this creation of habit. So I have a few things in my life that I have worked hard to create some habits around. Um, and it's helpful. I can see, and even though I can see how helpful it is, I still struggle with it. So my personal experience with yoga, mindfulness, ice bathing, and all, these things is not great, because it's kind of another thing that I have to add into my life. But certainly I have got clients that it has made just a big difference to their lives, a massive difference to their general stress, and it's made a big difference to their enjoyment of the exercise. So I've got a few that practice mindfulness/meditation, and then I've got two in particular that are kind of mindfulness and ice plunge, like cold shower, that kind of stuff. The cold shower one is the only one I could say that I've probably tried with any length of time. It, it, it I'm always like humans, and that's why I don't judge too many people too harshly, because humans are strange creatures. I felt in that sort of 2 months that I did it for, I did feel like it made a positive impact for sure. I definitely felt like a bit more invigorated. I felt like I was sleeping better during that period, but I just those cold showers were just so cold. So I built up to, like, I think 3 minutes was what I got up to, a cold shower. So look, I believe all of those things have got a place. I think what you've got to do as a human is figure out which things are easier for you to make a part of your routine, because what doesn't help is what I've just said. It's like I did it for 2 months and I liked it, but then I didn't like it enough to suffer through the shower. So it's what speaks to your personality. So mindfulness is probably, for my personality, out of all of the things, that's the hardest, because that means I actually have to lie still or sit still and kind of try and clear my head and just be there. That would be absolutely the hardest for me, but for someone else that might just be the best experience for them. So that, I think, is part of it. It's like you can't choose something that in itself causes you a little bit of anxiety to try and help you work on anxiety. Got to choose something that kind of fits into your life, fits into who you are. And then I think mindfulness, the deep breathing techniques, the ice plunging, yoga, those kind of things, absolutely wonderful for, just leaching out that cortisol.
Cool. And I'm going to put you on the spot here to wrap up. One easy win. If somebody is struggling with stress and sort of struggling to sleep, they feel like their running performance is not where it needs to be, where it needs to be. What's one thing they can do today, start doing today, that you think can have a big difference?
Yeah, look, I'm sorry, Brad. I'm going to go with two, but I'm going to say that creates a routine. So get into a routine, because I promise you, that bedtime routine can do so much to alleviate sleep and sleep stress. And the other thing that we didn't touch on, which is where I'm at now, that's why I want to just slip this last one in. Where I'm at now is that I feel like I fall asleep really well. I even feel like I'm sleeping deeply, but as I'm older, I'm not enjoying our hard bed. I've always loved our hard bed, but now that I'm older, I feel like my bed's too hard, and it's literally just the hardness of the bed that is compromising the quality of my sleep. And so that'll be my second win, Brad, is to make sure that you are in a comfortable environment. So for other people, that might mean something different. For me, I know it means I've got to explore a softer, um, a softer mattress for me. So routine and comfortable environment, and that will help a lot of the other things to click into place.
Yeah, Lindsay, just on the bed side of things, and there's two things that sort of just raised something for me. So I've always, like, I mean, I don't know what it is. Like, I've just always struggled with spending the amount of money you need to spend on a good quality bed. I just can't wrap my head around. But then somebody said it to me, is like, if you think about how much time in your life you're spending in that bed, it is just like, it is a no-brainer. Spend as much money as you physically can on a decent bed. It'll change your life, and it has. I can tell you that much. Like, it's changed my life. And the second, and this is probably not a healthy thing, but the second was an office chair. Like I also spend a lot of time in my office working, and I remember when I was struggling with some back issues. This was a good few years ago. You'll remember this. And then I started looking at office chairs, and ended up spending an absolute fortune on an office chair, and couldn't wrap my head around it. And between that and what I've spent on a bed, life changing, absolutely life changing. So sometimes you need to just get over yourself and spend money where you need to spend money, because it will change your life. So yeah, just that's my 2 cents worth when it comes to sort of spending money on a decent bed. And yeah, I mean, not that an office chair is going to alleviate stress, but it does help. So yeah, those are the 2 things.
Yeah, no,
Cool.
it absolutely will. I mean, that's the point here, is that you like anything you can do to minimize your body being in like fight or flight mode. And if you are sitting curled up and uncomfortable for 2 hour stretches at a time, that is not going to help your stress.
Yeah, absolutely. Lindsay, as always, thank you so much for your time here on the Fast to Beyond 50. Don't forget, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, I'm blown away by how few people actually who watch these videos on YouTube actually subscribe to the channel. It's less than half. It blows my mind. So please do hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on YouTube, if you're listening on whatever podcast player you're on, you can hit the subscribe button as well. Do leave us a rating and review if you wouldn't mind as well. We look forward to catching up again next week. From the two of us, it's cheers.